From the national championship straight to Manhattan, does Kansas State finally have a full transfer portal class? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers, and thank you so much for getting this channel past 550 subscribers. We are absolutely cooking, and we are so close to getting to 600 subscribers. So if you haven't already and you're listening right now, go ahead and take that quick extra second and click that subscribe button down below. Before we get started, we have a great episode for you today, by the way. But before we get started, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. I think we are finally done, but we're going to get to that in a little bit. And then we're also going to talk about the basketball games this weekend. But first, we have to discuss a commit coming into Kansas State. And this is a big one. And I mean it in multiple ways. A big one because it's going to change the aspect of this offensive line. And because this guy is a monster. He's huge. And it's very exciting to see what's next for Kansas State and how they're going to handle him. National champion. Offensive lineman, offensive tackle George Fitzpatrick, coming over from Ohio State, has committed to the Wildcats this week. And it's very exciting to see what is going to happen with Kansas State on the offensive line. I think they have done a fantastic job in this portal, taking care of the pieces and adding one more tackle, according to, well, in this case, with also Brandon Snee. I think you hit all the pieces you needed to when it comes to the transfer portal. Now we're starting to pick up the pieces with the last two portal additions, with Ralph Ortiz in the linebacking group, and now with George Fitzpatrick in the offensive line. You are adding more. Not only are you just getting the needs like you did initially with like a Gabe Powers for the linebacking group or a Brandon Snee in the offensive tackle group, you're adding more. You're adding more firepower, and that's only going to make this 105 roster size, when it's all said and done, that much more better. Because you are going to have some great competition. You know for a fact that you are going to be able to bring the best 105 with you week 0 to Dublin. So it's very exciting to see what's going to happen. And just the fact that you are going to have a national champion on your team heading into 2025, even though he wasn't a huge part of the offensive line, he was still there, and he is still going to be an asset to be able to bring that leadership, if you will, for the next group of offensive linemen and the offense and the entire team. Just having a national champion on your team is a big deal, folks. It really is. It shows that somebody has been there, and now you have that person in the room. Speaking of, according to PFF, Fitzpatrick only played in the bowl game 2 snaps, but he played. He is a national champion as well. He's going to have that ring. It's something he's going to be able to show everybody in the Wildcats room. And that should be exciting. That can give one extra piece of motivation for these folks. Overall, though, according to PFF, now he did play 3 seasons with Ohio State. We're going to dig into that in just a minute. But this last year, in 2024, his PFF grades rose significantly in the amount of time he played. He played 84 snaps on the offensive line. He played 93 snaps when it came to special teams. And his PFF grade went from a 59.2 in 2023 overall to a 73.8. That's his overall offensive grade. His pass block grade, 83.5. That is phenomenal. That is a very good grade. And that is exactly what you're looking for when you're picking an offensive tackle out of the transfer portal. This is an exciting piece. This is exactly what you should be looking for when you're trying to bolster that offensive line. George Fitzpatrick can be a guy that could immediately step up and be, quite frankly, a day one starter on this offensive line if everything works out and Connor Riley can get him where he needs to be. And I think we might have 2 offensive tackles starting week 0, day 1, that came out of the portal. That would not shock me whatsoever when it's all said and done. This guy is a monster. And when I mean a monster, 6'6", 313 pounds, according to his roster at Ohio State, according to his roster profile, Ohio State. Now, on three, when you're looking at it, it was a little different. It was 6'5", and they showed him 6'5", 273.8. So he might have lost a little bit, and they just maybe not have updated it on Ohio State's roster. But regardless of the case, 6'6", 6'5", and if you want to say he's 273 or 300 pounds, that is a big dude. And then you add in Brandon Snee, who is also 6'6", 320, and those are your two tackles for the future, hopefully. That's exciting. That is really exciting. Fitzpatrick has 2 years of eligibility left, so you're not just getting him for this year. It's not a rental out of the transfer portal, if you will. It's an exciting piece. And as long as he doesn't enter the NFL draft, you're going to get him for 2 seasons, assuming he doesn't enter the portal yet again. He redshirted in 2022 as a true freshman, so that is out of the way already. So he does still have 2 years of eligibility left. Overall, though, it's still going to be a really fun player. Out of Colorado, when he committed to Ohio State, was the nation's number 27 ranked offensive tackle in that recruiting class in 2022. He also played in the All-American Bowl in San Antonio heading into Ohio State, and he was a first-team All-Centennial League selection out of Colorado in high school. So there you go. In 2023, he wound up playing some snaps, not much, but against Western Kentucky, Michigan State, and Minnesota. So he got some Big Ten action in his first full year with Ohio State. And then he played in a lot of games in 2024 on a national championship winning team. It was just more on the special team side. But he did have some offensive plays as well. And when he did, as I mentioned with that PFF grade, he did fantastic on the pass blocking side. Now, I don't have any stats in front of me. I don't know if he was in when Will Howard was playing quarterback, but if he did, he has already experience in protecting a Kansas State quarterback. So look at that. There's not many players that are going to be on this roster heading into 2025 that are going to be able to have the check mark saying that you protected Will Howard and you protected Avery Johnson. You're not going to have that many just because so many are, sooner or later are going to be leaving from eligibility reasons or the portal or however the case may be. There's some. He's not going to be the only one, obviously, but just a fun little thing to keep in mind there. I'm excited for this offensive line group. I really am. And I think when you add in Avery Johnson taking the next step forward, you add Dylan Edwards, who is going to bring you just some fun speed on the outside of these tackles, and then some more. You got Joe Jackson, who can play inside the tackles and also outside as well. I think you have some really good dual threat running game, really triple threat running game when you add Avery Johnson into the mix. And then, of course, we have the conversation of can Avery Johnson's passing, take that next step forward. Well, if he has these two mammoths of offensive tackles on the outside like Fitzpatrick and Snee, I think you're going to be able to have a little bit more time in the pocket to make things happen. Then you have a speedy Jace Brown. You have some really tall receivers that you added in the portal as well. And then, of course, the tight end group hasn't got any weaker whatsoever. It's only gotten better. And I'm sure it's going to be even better once we find out what we get from a player like Lincoln Cure. This offensive line is going to be the pinnacle. It's going to be the reason why this offense takes that next step forward if everything works out the way it should work out. And it starts with players like this that we just got out of the portal in the end of January, when the portal has, for the most part, been closed. This is the last couple meetings of the portal before the spring window, because these are national champion players and the final game of the season getting that last 5 days to enter the portal. You get a couple more pieces. Kansas State's lucky enough to get one of them. And this might happen to be one of your starting tackles heading into 2025. That's exciting. That is very exciting. I want to get more into this, and I want to ask the question. We're going to kind of look at the portal as a whole here. Is it done? Now that we are starting to move into the new process and starting to shift towards focus of spring ball, is the portal class for Kansas State done? We're going to talk about that right here, all on Locked On Kansas State. Well, attending NFL playoff games is an experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, and the connection with other fans are unmatched. I remember the thrill of seeing my favorite team clinch the playoffs that with that live. The memory is just unforgettable. This year, Game Time makes it even easier, creating those unforgettable moments with their new feature, Game Time Picks. It filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters, being there. Game Time Picks helps you grab tickets for upcoming playoff games, and it couldn't have been any easier for you when you log into the app. You can find super deals that give you incredible value for amazing seats, and you can even preview the view from your spot before buying. The best thing, and I'll say it again, I've said it multiple times on this show when I talk about Game Time, the all-in pricing is the very best thing about this app. No surprise fees at checkout when you're already paying a decent amount for these tickets. You want to know what you're paying for, and you're not going to get bamboozled at the checkout. You get this nice peace of mind knowing that your tickets are also backed by a Game Time guarantee all the time. So with that being said, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And welcome on back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. Thanks for making me your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out Drake Toll and Locked On Big 12. They are breaking it down. They're covering it there fantastically about the entire conference. I'm sure you saw it this last Thursday over on the page. They had some interesting conversations for sure. I don't know. Some of them got a little bit colorful, if you will. But if you want to check those out, have some fun. And some of the times they don't even talk about sports. They just get into some wild conversations. I have to join them one of these days and get on over there for the Big 12 squad. But even that, let that be known, and let that check out for your second listen of the day. We're talking excitement here because the portal might be closed finally for Kansas State, but either way, they pick up George Fitzpatrick for their 14th edition in the transfer portal. When we started to pick up steam, I leaned more towards saying we're going to get closer to 15 than 10. And that looks like where we're at right now with 14. And although we started very slow in the transfer portal, I mean, there was a few weeks at the beginning where Kansas State didn't do anything. And I think it was safe to be a little bit nervous at first. But now looking at this transfer portal and how it all is shaping out, it's turned out to be quite the transfer portal class. Add that to a outstanding National Signing Day, National Recruiting Class of 2025, 26 players there, 14 players on the portal class, and you're bringing in 40 new faces to Kansas State this spring. That's exciting, but it also, I mean, is it a little nerve-wracking? I think so, but I think Coach Kleiman and his coaching staff will do a great job heading into the new year. 40 new faces, that means 40 new opportunities to only get better and 40 more opportunities to chase them back into the Big 12 championship game. And with that being said, getting them into the college football playoffs. You already saw my prediction. I'm going to stick with it until things change. But right now, I still have Kansas State and BYU right now in the way too early predictions heading into the new season playing in the Big 12 championship game. If I had to make the prediction now, which I did on a show just a couple days ago, I said Kansas State, BYU. I think that's a fair one. What do you think? I know it's way too early, but it's fun. That's what January's for, right? To have these type of conversations to when you can look at them and laugh at them next year and say, well, hopefully we're not laughing about that. But either way, is the transfer portal class finished? Is it over? I think so. I think we have finally met our match of where Kansas State needs to be heading into spring. Now, I will go out on this caveat and say that once we get to week 0, there are going to be some players that are currently not enrolled, not committed, or just not with Kansas State. As of today, there will be a couple players on the 105 roster that will be there once week 0 hits, meaning that we're probably going to bring in, I'll go out with a number and say 2 to 3 players out of the spring window that will be on the 105. I will say that, and I feel very confident about that. But going into right now, we are close to 130 players on the Kansas State roster. That's a lot of players because you got to get down to 105 before fall camp. And as I mentioned on yesterday's show, I believe that that number to 105 is going to happen a lot sooner than fall camp. It's going to happen probably towards the end of spring ball so they can make the necessary adjustments and let those players try and find a new home elsewhere. But when you look at all of the players that they added in the portal, you get Jason Ross, the edge out of Alabama. He comes home to Kansas State. You didn't really need an edge, but you got that one easily taken care of. We talked about the linebackers yesterday with Gabe Powers and then the new commitment of Ralph Ortiz. I don't think he even needed to, but the fact that you got to is fantastic. I think that's taken care of. And we've already had the conversations of what the transfer portal linebackers have looked in the past. Adding more than one is probably a good sign for that position group that obviously needs a little bit of extra help heading into the new year. The secondary, talking about the corners and the safeties, I think they did a fantastic job retooling in the portal. I mean, with the exception of the wide receivers, which we got 3 studs, in my opinion, I think the secondary places second on the portal winners, if you will. And that sounds like a good show. We might have to dig into that. But Amarian Fortenberry, cornerback. You got Marcavius Moss, safety, who I think is going to be your jack safety starting the year. Gunnar Maldonado, safety, was a leader, a captain at Arizona for the last couple seasons. There's just a lot of really good players. And then Jaden Rowe out of Oklahoma, who to me can be an absolute wild card. I'm really excited to see what we're going to get out of him. There's just a lot of fun players in this portal. I think they're done. I think they added every piece they needed to. We talked about the offensive line, adding multiple offensive linemen, and now you get interior and offensive tackle as well. And then even got a running back, right, out of Nebraska. So I'm all for it. I think when it's all said and done, I think we will have a couple more out of the portal come in the spring window. But heading in the spring ball, I think this team is exactly where we are going to be. I would be shocked if we get another portal piece. But if we do, we'll be talking about it right here on Locked On Kansas State. All right, let's dig in. Let's look at one more thing as we head into the weekend. We're going to talk college basketball. We're going to get a little bit of preview heading into the weekend with Kansas State taking on West Virginia. Coach Tang had some thoughts after the Baylor game that we need to get to. And then we're going to preview how this team can get out of a losing streak, because all they need is one win to light that fire, right? If that fire is even still there. Is the pilot light on? Let's talk about that right here on Locked On Kansas State. And welcome back into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. Let's talk basketball here. This weekend, the Wildcats are going to take on West Virginia at home. It's going to be at 5 o'clock on CBS Sports Network, and they got to find a way to get out of this rut. 6-game losing streak right now, and it's unbearable. It really is. After losing that 70-62 loss against Baylor, after having a 12-point lead and then winded up losing by 8, a 20-point swing in the wrong direction, after really beating Kansas with the exception of the first 4 minutes the last Saturday, and then obviously 3 games ago, another game against Texas Tech that you should have won. These are 3 games that you should have won. I feel like this is the same conversation we've had all year. I talked about it in non-conference play as well, that there are so many games of should have beens, and obviously they're not. And I know we can play that hypotheticals of what would happen if they would have been able to finish these 40 minutes. But regardless of that case, this team is 7-11. They are 15th in the Big 12 right now and way away from any kind of postseason basketball. If the hope is even alive, if there is even a breath of hope for this team, a statement win needs to happen against the ranked opponent coming to Manhattan on Saturday. Ranked 23rd in the country is the West Virginia Mountaineers, and this team is no slouch. There is a reason that they are ranked 23rd. This is going to be the second ranked team heading into Manhattan this season. The last time it happened, they're going to be the third team heading in. The last time it happened, they lost to Houston. The first time it happened, they defeated Cincinnati. But dare I say that West Virginia might be the best team out of all 3 of those right now. Now, I know that might be tough to think about when you're thinking Houston Cougars and how they played against Kansas State, but West Virginia is coming off one of the biggest upsets of the season, defeating Iowa State in their last game. They put on, they played really well I guess it's not their last game, 2 games ago, excuse me. They lost to Arizona State. So they're coming off. So yeah, let's take this back real quick. Let me make sure that we're all on the same page. On the 18th, they defeated Iowa State, who was ranked second in the country, 65-57. And then 3 days later, they lose to Arizona State, 65-57. So they had a fantastic upset, and then the next day they are upset. Or the next game they're upset. So they're coming in with a chip on their shoulder, but I really do think that West Virginia is a very good basketball team. 13-5, they're 4-3 in the conference, and although I think they're really good, it shows right there they're beatable. This is a perfect game for Jerome Tang and his basketball team to get back on pace after having the tough loss against Texas Tech, after having the dreadful loss against Kansas in Lawrence when you should have won that game if you would have started off strong. And I'm going to stick by those words all season long until we face Kansas again next season. I'm sticking by that. And then you should have, and we all know, you should have beat Baylor last week. You should have made that happen. You wound up losing by 8. If you just saw the box score, you'd think you had no chance, but they looked so good early in the first quarter. First half, they looked really good at the beginning of the second half, and they just couldn't finish. Can Kansas State finish a basketball game this Saturday on national television on CBS Sports Network, 5 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Central Time, excuse me? Can they finish a basketball game? It all comes down to what will happen with players like David Gasson, Coleman Hawkins, Doug McDaniel, and David Castillo. Those are the 4 right there. Let's add Brandon Hawson into the mix as well. Those are the 5 that all need to play their very best basketball. You might have a tough kind of situation like you did with the refs in the Baylor game. You can't let that slip. You can't let that bug you. You can't let that bother you. You have to win the game by any means necessary if you want even a chance of postseason basketball heading in. And I think you could win out the rest of the season and you might not even have a chance. And that's how crazy this conference is right now. For the record, if you won out, you definitely would. You'd be 14-6 in the conference. You'd probably win the conference, to be completely honest. That was a hyperbole. Either way, you have to have this win. West Virginia, another ranked win. That would put 2 ranked wins. Both of your conference wins would be ranked. And that would kind of, in a small way, put some of those losses on the back burner. It'd look good to the committee. It's not going to put you in bracketology by any means for quite some time. You still got to build a resume. But having ranked wins, that is absolutely what you need. Those are quad 1 wins in conference. Is exactly what you need. How do you stop West Virginia? That's going to be the biggest question. And number 1 is stopping Javon Small. Senior guard for West Virginia. We've seen him before. This is his first year with West Virginia, but he played on Oklahoma State last year. This is a player that has no issues with Big 12 play. His second year in the conference, he started his career with East Carolina before heading to the Big 12. But Javon Small is the player that you need to watch out for. He is in the top 25 in the entire country in points per game, averaging almost 20 points per game. He is in the top 50 in assists. He averages over 5 assists per game. He is the facilitator. He's the scorer. He is the team when it comes to West Virginia. He is fantastic. 6'3" guard out of South Bend, Indiana. And you got to watch out for him. Iowa State had a very tough time at stopping Javon Small in their game. When they upset Iowa State, he scored 27 points. He had 7 rebounds and 5 assists. He had 4 steals as well in only 4 turnovers. So he evened himself out with the turnover battle, but he had 27 points. And for the record, I know this is something that we don't like to hear. He was 7 for 7 from the free throw line. Not only does he score, not only does he rebound, not only does he facilitate. The rebounding thing is an underrated part of his game, by the way, too, and something that could impact Kansas State because they struggle with rebounds. You got to be able to stop him, and he goes to the free throw line, something that Kansas State has lost the battle in as well for multiple games. In that loss to Arizona State, Javon Small also went to the free throw line 11 times. So how do you stop Small? You shut him down, and you limit his free charity strike numbers. Don't let him drive the lane. Don't let him get really just easy fouls to allow him to get to the free throw line and get the game ahead and get the game out of hand. Although he went to the free throw line, he scored 14 points against Arizona State for the record, even though in that loss, even though he went to the free throw line 11 times, he was 10 for 11 in that game. From the field, he was 2 for 11. So Arizona State won that game, by the way. If you can limit him from the field and then also limit him from getting to the free throw line, Kansas State wins this basketball game. Will it happen? We'll see. Kansas State needs a win. They are so close. And if Jerome Tang thinks that's the case, I think you got to have some faith and trust in him. And what he said over the last couple weeks after some of these games have made a lot of sense when you go back and look at it, especially some of the press conferences he's had leading into games, not directly after, when he's had the opportunity to actually look at film and then discuss it with the media. For example, the post-game conference he had, the presser he had before the Kansas game. There's a lot of really good nuggets in that one, and discusses where he thinks this basketball team is right now. The word tinkering might be a buzzword, but they are that close, folks. And I hope we see a full 40-minute game heading in this weekend against West Virginia. If that happens, we are going to get our second Big 12 win, and we are going to get our second ranked win in conference and for the season. And then maybe we can start having a different conversation about this team heading into the new week. Sounds good to me. Sound good to you? On the other side as well, the women's team are taking on the Colorado Buffaloes. You want to get that preview? That's already out on the page. You can check that out. It's already on the channels as well. It's the third segment in yesterday's full show if you're listening on audio. We'll be back here at the beginning of the week on Monday. We'll break down some basketball. We got some more portal talk, and we're going to go position by position group. We're going to start digging into the football team and see how we can get this roster to 105. Plenty of predictions, plenty of thoughts, plenty of opinions. None of them I will apologize for right here on Locked On Kansas State. But until then, please like the video, please subscribe, get us to 600, and we'll be back here on Monday right here on Locked On Kansas State.